here. First of all, welcome everybody. My name is Nick Kindler, and I'm the CEO of Kindler and Company, the founder of Kindler and Company. I'm an author and executive communication coach. Here, what we do is we inspire, educate, and empower leaders to create a better world through improved communication. And you know, one of the things that we've been doing over the last few months is a series called Communicate with Impact. And what these are conversations with leaders about the challenges of communication. It's really great to see so many of you here today. We did get a tremendous influx of attendees literally over the last 48 hours. So many people, I think, either interested in the book, the person, or the subject. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Here's how it's going to work. We're going to chat for about 30 or so minutes, and then we're going to answer questions. So if you have questions, please drop them into the chat. You can find the chat at the bottom. And I highly encourage you to do that because we'll be fielding questions. And if you have one, you want to unmute yourself at the end, we can also do that as well. Now, let me introduce our guest because we are going to have a chat today with Jordan Berman. And I'm going to stop my sharing and move right into my intro. Let me talk to you a little bit about Jordan. Jordan is the Vice President of Global Corporate Affairs, Business Transformation and Strategy at APOTEX. He's played an instrumental role in leading change throughout his career. He has held leadership roles at Johnson & Johnson and at AstraZeneca, which is where I had the privilege of meeting him way back when. And he's led organizational change as well as smaller scale change. He also spent 8 years as a consultant providing counsel to some of the world's leading brands, such as SC Johnson & Sons, Kraft, and Pfizer. He holds a joint EMBA from the Kellogg School of Management and the Schulich School of Business. He is also a keynote public speaker and faculty at the Schulich School of Business. And yes, he has a book, which we're going to be talking about today, the Trust Trifecta, which is available at all of your favorite online channels, Amazon, Chapters, Indigo, Barnes & Noble, etc. I am thrilled to have him here, Jordan. I am, because we met 15 years ago. I loved working with you back then, but it was about 8 to 10 months ago when I saw this book, picked it up, and then I reached out to you and chatted. I knew I wanted to talk more about it with you. So welcome, everybody. Let's give Jordan a warm welcome by clapping in silence. Jordan, welcome.
Thanks very much, Nick. I'm really happy to be here and have a chance to chat with you and everybody else.
So Jordan, let's start by diving into this book. And you know, I really did get a lot out of it. It sings to me almost. And so let's talk about the Trust Trifecta. What is the Trust Trifecta?
Yeah, the Trust Trifecta is really comprised of 3 elements of communication. So I like to talk about it as sort of next level communication skills. It's not about what I would say the foundational or price of entry communication skills, the kinds of things we always talk about, you know, eye contact, body and animation, things like that. This is about consistency, transparency, and authenticity. And at the heart of the book, really what it is, it's about the how we communicate, not the what. And we can talk more about that. And the last thing I'll say is for those of you who are not horse racing enthusiasts, and I am not one either, a trifecta is when you bet on the horse to both first place, second place, and third place, or win place show as it's known, and you get that right and you hit the jackpot. Same thing here. There is a pecking order, if you will, with authenticity in the most coveted spot, followed by transparency in second place, if you will, and consistency, critically important, in third. So that is sort of the method at a very high level. The book really is about communicating so that you can make a connection with people and foster high trust environment.
Which in today's day and age is, you know, that trust is paramount. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to dive into some of the words you just mentioned, in the trifecta of authenticity. I think you said in order: authenticity, transparency, and then consistency. Yeah. I think sometimes people use authenticity and transparency interchangeably. Can you articulate the difference or the way you see the difference between those two?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about communication and transparent communication, it's about honest or truthful communication, communication that isn't misleading or deceitful. If you think about authentic communication is basically when you're being true to yourself, your spirit, your personality, your style. And so there is a distinction. I know people kind of mix it up, but the two are very different. And I'll give you one example to highlight it. If you think about authentic communication, like many of you probably work with others and you film corporate videos. And often when I'm working with someone and they want to do multiple takes because they flubbed a word or they've said or ah, and I say imperfect communication is much more powerful because precisely it's authentic than perfect or polished communication. I'm not saying it's not impactful to be articulate and clear. Absolutely it is. But it's okay also to slip up sometime because that's what makes you relatable and human. And that's where the connection part comes in. So that's the distinction.
I love that example you just gave, Jordan. And it's funny, in the work that I do in coaching, I often say, what happens when you make a mistake on stage or on video, and it actually own it is the authentic approach. So I love the way you put that. Now, how do you incorporate this trifecta of trust into your work or your practice or even your business? I mean, I do a lot of work with entrepreneurs, so I'm thinking they're probably thinking, and there's a lot of them on the call here, how do we embrace this? How do I incorporate this into my daily practice or encourage it with my teams? What are your thoughts?
Well, so the first thing is it's all about what I call the new R&D, rigor and discipline. You have to be intentional or deliberate about it. The one thing I've noted, having worked now for for over 30 years rather, with hundreds of leaders and in many different organizations, is that there is an assumption that as you sort of grow in your career and start leading people, that leaders have good communication skills. And that is a very misguided notion. And also at the same time, it's often classified as a soft skill, another misguided assumption. LinkedIn did a survey 2 years ago of all the skills that were important from recruiters, and there were thousands of people that responded. And while creativity and innovation were up there, they were in the top 10 for sure, and leadership was up there, it wasn't number one, nor was strategy or vision or anything like that. It was communication, the ability to have an interpersonal exchange with one or 100,000 that's impactful and effective. So what I would say in terms of every day is you have to be intentional about it for sure. You have to have a level of self-awareness and self-reflection.
Hmm.
Good to get feedback from others as well. But if you look at each three, there's a lot beneath each of those three components of the trifecta. So it might be worthwhile to delve into those.
Okay, well, let's do that. Let's delve into. I was going to ask you about rigor,
Yeah,
but
talk about that.
because I think that that's, and I will come back. I'm going to come back to the authenticity and transparency.
Let's talk
The
about
reason
rigor though, because that's an important one, Nick. And I think organizations, I mean, your clients, often struggle. They understand it intellectually. Oh, I have to be disciplined about it. But operationally, how do I make that happen? So I'll give you 5 tips.
awesome.
The first is like anything else, you have to have some kind of plan, right? I'm sort of being Captain Obvious, but if you want to be intentional about it and planful and thoughtful, you have to have a structured approach. That's how you're going to be more disciplined and bring more rigor to it. 2, you have to have organizational or enterprise-wide view to what else is going on in the organization at the time when you're thinking about communicating, if it's on a broader level than your team. Although even if it's within your team and department, it's important to understand what else is being talked about or what else is happening. And I'll give you a quick anecdote again. Every Monday, I meet with my team and we have an editorial review and we look at all the content we're going to publish in that week on whatever channel or platform, internal or external. And the reason we do that is because in the intervening time that we've met, that 1 week before, the Monday previous, there could have been something that happened in the organization that would cause us to consider maybe now is not the right time to communicate said message. And this happened last year. 2 years ago, rather, we unfortunately had to let go a few hundred people from one of our manufacturing sites. It happened on the Wednesday before of our editorial meeting. And while given my role, I knew something was going to happen, we didn't know the exact day until really the day before. Fast forward 4 days later, here we are at editorial meeting, and one of the stories that was planned weeks earlier was ironically about long tenured friendships in the organization. We're fortunate to have hundreds of people who've been there for decades, and we found a number of them who have formed long-standing relationships, and we were going to focus on that because we know human interest stories are really important. Well,
Mm.
how do you think that would look 4 days after we let go a few hundred people to talk about long tenured relationships? So having that enterprise view is number two. Number three, to your point about rigor, is measurement. We know that what matters gets measured, and we measure everything. So whether it's a written communication, whether it's on our intranet, and by the way, the vast majority of our analytics are free. It's just about spending time to understand not just how your message resonated, who's reading it, how long have they spent with it. So we know everything. It's anonymous, of course, and it's aggregate, but it helps us inform and shape our communication strategy moving forward. So for example, because we've measured, we know what kinds of stories resonate with employees in writing versus on the intranet. We know what kinds of stories they're going to spend more time on. We know what if video plays an important role. So measurement's the third thing. The fourth thing I would say is you have to think about customizing. So when you talk about rigor and discipline, a big part of rigor and discipline, again, gets back to the planning, but it's a bit more specific. It's about being deliberate about your message. What is the purpose? What is the audience? Many organizations send everything to everyone. And I'm saying you'll be much more impactful if you are customizing your message or segmenting it based on your audience. And then the last thing I would just say is really about foresight. It's a little different than planning. It is about thinking ahead.
Mhm.
But if you are thinking about communicating on an initiative or some kind of topic, you have to think about what else in the future you're going to be saying about that. The future, I don't mean years. I mean 2 weeks from now or 2 months or at a meeting or town hall, because you want to connect the two together. You want to have an ongoing integrated narrative so you can make sure your stakeholders and help them make sense of what you're saying. So those are the 5 tips I'd give you.
On that last one, that foresight, which has always been of interest to me, I'm wondering about, I'm just going, we've discussed some of the things that we want to talk about. So I'm going off but it's just interesting. What is it seems to me that especially for larger organizations, that you might engage in a little bit of analysis paralysis at that point. Like this could happen and this could happen, therefore let's not talk about this, which means some vital information doesn't get shared. How do you tackle that fear of foresight?
Yeah, so I would look at it a little bit differently because the analysis part or the over analysis, as you say, doesn't happen. Because if you're launching, let's say, just a new corporate initiative, my assumption is you're not going to talk about it just one time, that you're going to launch it, let's say, then you're maybe going to celebrate a milestone. You might, at the end of it, talk about it. During it, depending how long it's being implemented, you might be talking about it. So when I say foresight, it's more about just thinking ahead about what else you're going to be talking about. This is particularly important when you're talking about change communications, transformation communications,
Mm.
or sometimes over months or multiple years, you're going to be talking about something. And so just thinking a little bit ahead, it's not that you have to have it perfect, but you do want to think about what you're going to say. For organizations, for example, you don't want to come out one day and say, we've had a fantastic quarter. Oh my God, we're firing on all engines. And 3 weeks later say, oh my God, we actually have to do a restructuring. It's really that simple. It's just thinking a little bit ahead to what you're going to be saying and when you're going to be saying it.
Now, communication in general is a vulnerable practice and process. So how can we strengthen that muscle of vulnerability as leaders?
Yeah, I love this question, Nick. I mean, this is obviously a little bit at the heart of authenticity. I mean, vulnerability, I mean, if you even look at the derivative of the word, the Latin word vulnus, it means being open to emotional injury. And so what it means is, you know, being honest when you don't know. I find that leaders often feel like they have to have the right answer and all of the answers. And what I say is it's okay to say you don't know. And I will tell you, I've been very privileged to support 11 presidents and CEOs in the past 18 years alone. Very different. Different by gender, different from the countries around the world, different in their experiences, different communication style, different leadership style. But I can tell you, forget about one hand, basically one finger, how many people have said, I don't know, and asked a question. And it's basically been one, well, almost two. One said it once. That's not a lot of people if you're at the most senior level in an organization just saying, I don't know. And the thing is, it's okay to say you don't know. You don't have to have all the answers. That's why you have a group of people supporting you, because you don't have the monopoly on wisdom. Your idea to seek out diversity of thought and perspective is one key to being vulnerable. The other thing, again, I will say is self-reflection and self-awareness. That's really important. The more you understand how you come across and how you carry yourself and how you connect with people, the safer you will feel being vulnerable.
So let's talk a little bit about you. You have something called the 3 C's in your book, and I'm, by the way, we're for those of you that have joined, we're kind of midway through a conversation about with Jordan Berman, the author of the Trust Trifecta. All of the content, or meant not all of it, some of the content we're talking about is from the book, and so I'm. One of the things you mentioned are these 3 C's and the role they play. Let's dive into those if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I talk about credentials, character, and credibility in the book.
Hmm.
The reason I talk about them again is it gets back to the premise of the book, which is communication for impact and communicating trust is less about the content, the what, and much more about the how you deliver it. And look, I'm not pulling any mystery here. I'm not, unrevealing any wild secrets of the universe. You all know this because you've been on the receiving end, maybe of a performance conversation where the person delivering it wasn't as tactful or sensitive or compassionate when giving you constructive feedback. So what I say about those 3 C's is this. One, credentials. They're overplayed. Again, when we talk about leaders, we talk a lot about what they've been able to accomplish. Oh, Nick's a superstar. Nick exceeded sales forecasts. He launched this fantastic and creative presentation. I can go on, Nick, but we don't have time. But Nick is great. What we don't talk about typically is the trail of tears Nick has left behind. So even in the past 10 years alone, you've seen philosophically organizations modify their performance management system so that there's equal weighting on the what versus the how. And so the credentials part of this is just to remind people, it doesn't matter how much you know. That's not what it's about. It's not because you're the smartest person in the room. Trust will be bestowed upon you. You have to earn trust. So I'll give you a very quick anecdote about this. I worked at an organization once where they were transitioning between one president and CEO to another president and CEO. And we were all gathered in this foyer, and there were about 300 or 400 people. And I was on the second floor, and there were some people behind me. And the current president spoke for a few minutes and introduced the incoming president. And up walked the incoming president. That person spoke for 2 minutes maximum and said all the right things. I can't wait to join your organization. I've heard great things. I look forward to learning from you, building on your success to date. And they walked away. Within 10 seconds, I heard a few people back in my ear, I don't trust her. Now you have to ask yourself, why could somebody have such a visceral, immediate reaction to a complete stranger who, by the way, had all the credentials and spoke very well, was very articulate and very polished? And it's because of the how they delivered. That's credentials. Character, look, it's tied to the trust trifecta because it's obviously all about transparency, as is credibility. You can't be credible if you're not trustworthy. And so when we talk about credibility and we talk about character, those are absolutely intertwined with authenticity and transparency.
Now, I just want to go into the credibility and the trust. Where do you see values fitting into those 3 C's?
I see the values absolutely being fundamental to your character for sure. Probably credibility too, but your character, I mean, that's really what you have, right? That's who at the core of who you are. That's your personality, right? That's how you show up. So I would say values is part of that for sure. And that is in part a little bit when I talk about in the book about consistency is you can't say one thing and then behave in another way. that is inconsistent with what you've said, because that erodes your credibility. So they're all sort of interconnected. And so you can't say, oh, values are really important at my company and I know what they are and I'm going to speak them, and then behave in a way that compromises those or violates those.
One of the things that, and I was kind of nerding out in your book, and I didn't admit this to you until just now, but I was kind of nerding out in your book because you have this list in your book of must-haves, and at the top of your list, this is later in the book, is practice, and you've already mentioned it, and I share this all the time in my talks and workshops, that communication is not just a skill, it's a practice. So can you share with me what's necessary, or what are the things we can practice to authentically communicate clearly and with transparency?
Yeah, well, the first thing is, people often say to me, how do you reconcile authenticity with practice? Meaning, if you practice, are you really being authentic? The two aren't mutually exclusive. Being authentic doesn't mean being improv. Again, it means staying true to yourself and showing up as you really are. The practice part, I'm not sure I can say so much about it, because it is what you think, which is a commitment to the content. So in other words, you have to get so comfortable and familiar with the content that it doesn't appear as though it's rehearsed or messaged or too polished. Again, this person who was the incoming president was a very smart person. There's no doubt about it. She had incredible credentials. She was very astute. She was very articulate. But the way that she carried herself, and by the way, for her whole tenure, which ended up being quite short, she was never able to overcome that. She couldn't form that connection with people in the organization. She would never let her guard down. People would ask simple questions. How was your weekend? She was from the United States. Did you go to these restaurants? And she would give up nothing. It's very hard to make a connection with someone. So anyways, as it relates to practice, if you think about your favorite or your most compelling speaker in the world, you think that they don't practice? I'm telling you that they do. All of them. Obama, you pick any speaker, any orator who has fantastic skills. I practice all the time. I'm very comfortable presenting. I never take it for granted 3 decades on, ever. So that's what I have to say.
I'd love to just go back and hit on that improv word you mentioned. And, one of the things I learned not long ago was this, we've heard so many people like, don't worry, Jordan, I'm going to wing it. I got it. I'm going to wing it. And winging it is actually comes from the theater, where an understudy would be waiting in the wings. So, and if we think about an understudy, they studied and prepared for that one shot to come out on the stage and replace the lead character. The reason I bring that up is, this idea of preparation, because I also get a lot of people saying to me, Nick, if I'm over prepared, I'm not authentic. I'm not myself. And I think there's something really unique and powerful about I like to think of a jazz musician, or any musician for that matter. They can, if they know the music inside and out, then they can do a solo that knocks your socks off, but they have to practice it before they can do that solo. So once you're confident and comfortable with that content, because you've rehearsed it, you've practiced it, only then can you really authentically improvise around it and stay on message. That's
precisely it. And I'd also say there are a couple of other, I would say, under-recognized benefits of practice outside of your ability to be compelling whenever you're speaking or writing, whatever you're doing. And that is that if it's in a presentation, it's going to reduce your anxiety. It's going to increase your self-confidence. You're going to feel better knowing that you're prepared. And by the way, people in the audience see it. For those people who say, I can wing it, what they don't know is they don't go back to the audience and say, how did I come across? I had somebody once who got up, we gave him a prime spot at a global leaders meeting. He actually kind of knew the topic, but he clearly didn't prepare, because on the feedback we got, so-and-so didn't appear like he knew the content. Well, so is that really how you want to show up? You have to ask yourself that. What is the kind of impression? What is the kind of impact I want to leave once I leave the room?
Jordan, I'm going to just pause for a moment. I'm going to remind the folks that are on and listening and watching to be prepared to share some questions, because we're going to come up to that in just a few minutes. I do have a few more questions I want to share with you, but if you have a question, please drop it into the chat. or just say, I do, and then we'll ask you to unmute at the right time. So please let those questions fly in, as we go through. A bit of a departure, because we've talked a little bit about the content of the book, but what prompted you to write this? I mean, you've worked, as you mentioned, with presidents and leaders. You've been a consultant. You've seen a lot. You've shared some great stories already today. But why? Why did you do this?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nick. Part of it is that precisely because I've been able to work in so many organizations, and I've coached myself probably close to 700 people, that I've had the opportunity, I've had the benefit of learning and listening and watching, and I've seen where there's an opportunity for improvement. And I'm all about capability building and making people like you better communicators, because I've seen firsthand that it can be an accelerator and it can be a derailer if you think about it from a career standpoint, and it can have a really positive impact on people and it can have a really negative impact on people. And the one thing I'll say is that it is underestimated, is underemphasized, the impact that it can create, particularly I would say for leaders, meaning that we know that people hang on every word that they say. And we know that people watch every move that they make, and people are drawing conclusions, fairly or not, rightly or wrongly, they're drawing conclusions and inferences from what you're saying and how you're saying it. So I wanted to write a book that was not theory, that wasn't a tool book, that was very short. I mean, it's 110 pages. It's not going to take a long time. It's not expensive, but just something simple that says, here are a few concepts that you can immediately apply, that you'll see results immediately, and then back it up by research. And there's a ton of research in the book from different well-known organizations to support kind of my premise. So my thought was really that I've had the benefit of working with these hundreds of people. By the way, I've also had the benefit of seeing hundreds of thousands of results from engagement surveys. Because when I worked at Johnson & Johnson, we had 130,000 employees. I was there for 5 years. We did an engagement survey every year. We got to see all the results. So I also understand what moves people. And a lot of what we talk about, a lot of what I talk about in the book, and a lot of what we're talking about today is part of that.
So Simon Sinek, who, you use what, how, why in the book is, and I'm not saying it's the same model at all, but whenever you hear the why, I use what, how, why in parts of my work as well. But I think it was him, at least I've found it as attributed to him, the quote, which is, leadership is communication. And why is it so important? I mean, you've kind of touched on it a couple of times, but in your work in particular, let's just say that focusing in the life sciences, healthcare world that you're in, why is it so important?
Yeah, well, a few reasons. One, we're dealing with patients' lives, right? We're dealing with patients who are struggling with some kind of medical illness. And so first of all, we have to give them accurate, credible, truthful communication for sure. When something goes wrong, which inevitably it does with any organization and with any pharmaceutical product, you have to be proactive. Again, you have to be transparent about what went wrong and what steps you're doing to correct it and or prevent it happening again. In my organization, it's maybe a little different because we didn't have communications when I first joined. That's why they recruited me. And so the role that it plays, I mean, it's grown over the past 4 years to really a global infrastructure. We weren't on social or digital media channels. We didn't talk to people internally. We didn't talk to people externally. Right now, I'm in meetings with senior government people probably 2-3 times a week, whether it's federal or provincial. I know there's some folks stateside, but state or federal, same thing. We never did that. So the amount of sort of profile or scrutiny and valid scrutiny that we have from a number of stakeholders, communication is absolutely critical. And the ability to communicate in a compelling way, in an impactful way, the stakes are even higher for people in this sector for sure.
Now, taking it in a little bit of a different direction, the communication, you've talked about how it can transform or not lead to transformation of an organization. I'm thinking about the story of the leader who kind of people didn't trust, and then it didn't last that long. But what is the role of communication when it comes to innovation and transformation of an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there are two slightly different approaches. I mean, when it comes to change management communications or transformation communications, and I I mean, I teach a course at Schulich on it, but I just did a course for a month for a client on this. It's really about understanding first that change communications is different than regular corporate communications. Because when you're dealing with change, you have heightened anxiety, you have uncertainty, you have worry from people. There's a future state that maybe isn't completely clear. It's ambiguous. They're not sure how it's going to impact them, their team, their colleague, their job. There's a lot that's going on when you're going through a transformation. There's also obviously the transformation itself, the what is changing. How do you translate that into a way that people can understand it and understand the impact on them? So that's a little different than innovation. I think the challenge when you're talking about innovation, and I spoke about this just last week, is that one of the things that you have to remember when you bring something forward and you're talking about innovation is that your audience isn't as close to it as you. So I always talk about one of the fundamentals is it's not about you when you're doing communication. And we say that, but we don't always mean it, because I have people coming in to our executive management committee that I sit on who are presenting slides with an incredible amount of detail, which is great if you're leading the project. But as a global executive, I don't know, and I don't have the bandwidth to understand every single tiny detail of every country around the world on every project on a complex Gantt chart. So when you're talking about innovation, you have to, first of all, bring people along, share the context for your thinking about why this is important. And most importantly, how can you link it to what already exists in the organization in terms of a strategy or a mission? It can't be something that's completely separate, because that's going to be hard to be credible and to have somebody support it. And so again, I think the context, bringing people along, translating it, linking it to strategy, and making sure that you take that kind of time, that's critical when you talk about innovation.
So those are your four keys to communicating with impact, I believe, and that's in the book, right? The objective, it's not about you, context, and clarity.
Well, yes and no. They are in the book, talked about it, but I talk about those not separately from the Trust Trifecta. But yeah, I mean, it's not about you. When people say to me, what are the fundamentals? I say, it's not about you, right? It's particularly for those people who have specialized or expert knowledge. There is a natural default. We want to share. That's what humans are about. I want to tell you everything I know about X. The problem is that your audience doesn't want to hear everything you know about X. So early in my career, I used to work with a lot of researchers and scientists from very prominent organizations like the Mayo Clinic, et cetera. And I would do media training with them. I would say, tell me about your study. And really what I was saying is, tell me what you found out. So they would start talking about their study. Oh, it's randomized, placebo controlled, this many cohorts, this many people. 22 minutes later, I still haven't heard what the result was. And I say, folks, your interview is 3 minutes long. You got to tell me the headline first. Start with the most important thing, the key takeaway. We found in this study that drug X worked. It was safe and effective. Now let me tell you how we found that out. So start with that first. So when I say it's not about you, that's fundamental one. The second one is, and it really is the first one that guides everything, Nick, is what is the purpose of your communication? Again, this gets back to intent and planning and being deliberate. We have people coming in or writing stuff, but they're not thoughtful about it, meaning not what they say or how they say it, even what's the purpose? Are you there to inform, persuade, make a recommendation, make a proposal, update? What is the objective of your communication? That will help you stay focused on it. And then the third thing is context, which I did talk about already. Very important to give context. Lots of times we share information, we're closer to it, but everybody else wasn't in the room when we debated all the other possible options and the pros and cons of them. They just hear the outcome, the decision, the action, the way we're going to go, but they don't have the benefit of everything else. We got to make it very explicit for people, make it easy for them to navigate through everything. So those are the couple of fundamentals. And then of course, sorry, the last one, clarity. It's the holy grail for sure. Everything will be much easier if you are clear. You'll be more concise, you'll be more credible, you'll be more knowledgeable if you're clear.
I'm going to just jump in and share an experience that sounds similar to the what you talked about in terms of getting really, really clear. I had the privilege of coaching folks from U of T Medicine by Design, and a joint program through Mars. And they were regenerative scientists. And I don't know if I shared this with you before, Jordan, but I was coaching this regenerative scientist, and I couldn't get the individual to articulate exactly what the research was all about. And she would share readings and data and science. And finally, I took a different approach and I said, can you just share with me, what's a day in the life? Like what happens from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed? And she said, well, I go in and I read all the readings of the data, and I check to see if the pancreas is still in a regenerative state. And then I keep going. And I was like, hold on. Did you just say you've regenerated a pancreas? And she said, yeah. As if I was crazy. That and I do share this anecdote quite a bit, but the reality is most people don't know that they've regenerated a pancreas, and that's possible. And what I found out was it's not about the regenerated pancreas. That's easy, according to her. It's the vascularization of the pancreas, making the pancreas work within the body. And the reason I share this is because if she can do that, of course, she'll be one step closer to curing diabetes, which kills millions a year around the world. And so I find that it's not just about like solving problems or sharing the content. It's vital that we know this information. It provides hope and it provides opportunity for those that may not know it is happening.
Well, and I think, just to build on that, Nick, I mean, just last week, I had one of the participants in a course I was teaching ask me, or share a story rather, about how they brought forward an idea, to your point, around innovation, something new the company should be doing. And they were very disappointed, and I would say even frustrated, that it didn't land well. It didn't get the kind of support from the executive team. And this person actually attributed it to them and the culture. Well, they're not open to it. They think they're stuck in their old ways. And while some of that might have been true, I said, what was your role in it? And they kind of looked at me, what do you mean? I said, well, did you give them context? Did you link it to something you're already doing? Did you say it's support this goal that we're already focused on? I mean, all this will help them understand. Otherwise, you're coming out of nowhere just saying, hey, I've got a great idea. We should do something. And they're thinking, sorry, I'm not sure. This is not on our priority. So, that's one thing. And then the other one just gets to your very interesting about regenerative pancreases, which is about the challenge people have translating the complex into the simple. And many people do. And, part of my role in strategy and stuff is taking all the conversations we have as an executive team and bringing it into the organization so that people understand very clearly, what are we playing for? Why did we make this decision? Why this trade-off? When is this going to happen? And sharing it in a way where they can understand it, but also what their role is in it. How can they contribute to the achievement? Because one of my big goals is to build alignment. And we're talking about, 9,000 people in multiple countries around the world that speak different languages. And building alignment is about that ability to translate that conceptual or that difficult into simple, effective language.
Amazing. I'm going to pause. I've got a few more questions, but I also want to again encourage everybody out there watching, listening, to share their questions. We do have a question from David. He's actually, I know David. He's a member of Entrepreneurs Organization in Atlanta, and he's also has a couple of very cool businesses. David's question is, what are the best methods of making storytelling aspects of communication the most relevant to an audience?
Well, I don't know about the best methods, because storytelling in itself is a method, but I do think it is like any story. Again, sitting down and being planful and thoughtful about what is the story that you want to tell. A lot of people, again, the default is to just talk about the what versus everything else. So first of all, what is the impact of telling your story, other than you're saying to make it? Is it memorable? Do you want to move them into a different direction? Are you trying to influence perceptions or attitudes? So everything starts no different than any other project. What is your objective? And if your objective is to do X, that's going to inform and shape your strategy. And in this case, the story you want to tell. But like any other story, David, I would say break it down, if you will, into chapters or subject categories, more bite size. And again, you don't have to memorize the story, just the headers at least, a couple bullets you want to talk about each, and then it's all about practice. Nick talked about it earlier. It really is about practice. I can't stress it enough. And it's the simplest thing to do. So yeah, hopefully that helps, David. But again, questions, great. Anecdotes, you can share anything with Nick and I. We just want to have a good conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm just going to add to, because you talked about, in the transformation question about not vulnerability, but really the emotion around communication and how the emotion that's attached to it. And I'm just going to make a dotted line over to that question, which is, if you can create an emotion in that story or can tap into emotion, your story is likely going to have a greater impact.
Well, that's really important, Nick, because you're right. I mean, the thing that I always say is, look, we are emotional by nature. That's the nature of human beings. And so you have to find a way to connect with people. And what I say to them is 3 simple things that are related to the trifecta. People trust you when they feel they know you. And they'll know you when you're being authentic, when you're showing your true self. And people trust you when they feel like you're being honest with them. That's the transparency. Those are both feelings. And the third is consistency. People trust you when they experience, which is a feeling, when they experience you consistently, meaning you're saying one thing and you're doing something. Those are all about feelings. So your point is well taken, Nick.
I have a couple more questions, but I just, there was a nice comment from Rochelle, and Rochelle talks about Nancy Duarte's TED Talk. I don't know if everyone's seen that, but it's a great, and she actually has a couple of wonderful books as well. She, I think the book is called Resonate. She also has a program. She does a whole thing on storytelling, and she talks about getting to that call to action at the end. And I love your point here, because you need to have that call to action. I think the statistic is something like 46% or 48% of employees in North America rarely leave a meeting knowing what to do next. And so, number one, tapping into the emotion of the in storytelling, but also having that call to action, so we're really clear on what is needed, is very important. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Rochelle. Jordan, any comments or?
Oh, I appreciate it. That's a great point. Absolutely. And you know, it's funny because sometimes when I've been on stage with some colleagues and they've presented, when they stop presenting, they kind of just stand around, but they don't formally close, call of action or nothing. And then they just say, oh, Jordan. And I'm like, what are you calling me for? Like, formally close off. Thank you very much for your attention. Or here's what I want you to take away. Summarize it, call to action. So well said. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and if you have anecdotes, folks, you want to share, it'd be great also.
We have a great question from Ranjith, and Ranjith says, how do you tackle a short attention span? At times the content to be delivered can be intense and lengthy. Any tips on keeping the audience engaged?
I have a few, but Nick, I'm sure you do, because you do a lot of presentation skills training. The first is, I would say, engage the audience, interact with the audience, actually ask them questions. And you can do that a few different ways. One, you can actually ask them a question just out loud and have them put it on screen. If you're on Zoom, they have a poll. You can pre-populate the poll ahead of time. They can answer it. You can share the results real time with everybody on screen. And again, but engaging them, because you know, one of the things I share in presentation skills training is that it still isn't a one-way thing. Yes, you are there to impart or share some information and maybe get support for something, but it is a dialogue. And the truth is, the more that you engage people, the more information you're going to have. Not only will it be more impactful for them, but you actually get information from people. So just very quickly, when I talk about transformation and resistance that comes up, people are like, oh, well, what do you do about it? I say, you find out about it. You go and find out what's going on. Why are people feeling that way? One, so that you can turn around and get them engaged, but two, because they're going to give you information, intelligence that actually is going to help you inform and shape your communications going forward. It might be something like confusion or a lack of awareness or whatever it is. So engaging people, I would say ask questions is number one. Number two, avoid all of the technical kind of jargon and acronyms and just talk. You have to remember that people aren't as close to the content as you. They're not the experts you are. So really talk in a very simple way. But Nick, you probably got a few more. I don't want to do too many.
No, those are excellent. And you know what, I'm today I want to shine the light on you and the folks that are listening in. And I think those are excellent. I'm not going to dive in because we jump in. We have about 10 minutes left and we have a couple of questions, but that was a great answer. Thank you, Jordan. Leanna, do you want to take yourself off mute and jump in and ask the question?
I love a digital hand and a live voice. Leanna gets
I'm
the
so polite. I know.
applause.
You know, I like to hear my own voice, Jordan. I have a question. So I started a new job. I worked last year all through COVID and the exhaustion. I worked for an American company. I'm very happy. The different Canadian companies are very different. So, you know, coming back to Canadian mindset. My question for you is, we're talking a lot this past week about COVID exhaustion, right? So Ontario shut down, Quebec has riots across the country. There's all these different restrictions. We're 13 months in, and I had to raise my hand today and say, to be completely fair, I don't actually know how to communicate to people that are in this kind of stress. I've communicated to parents who are managing adverse events in children's medication. I've communicated to, you know, employees when they're worried about the safety of one of our drugs and what that means for their job stability and that kind of stuff. But this is really, and I hate this word, but it's true, it's unprecedented. Can you say, is there anything, you know, that you can kind of advice you can give on should we be doing something different? Should we just be, you know, staying the course? Just your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. First of all, congrats on your new job.
Thank you.
Second of all, excellent question, and one that I get frequently. And so I have a few thoughts for sure. First of all, in no particular order, I would say that in general, people have overemphasized the negative of this virtual way of communicating, and kind of, I would say, allocate too much emphasis on saying, well, our engagement levels have gone down because we're not in person. I will tell you, I've onboarded two people whom I've never met, one of which was a few days after we closed down last March. And I'm not the only person by any means. Those two people have thrived in their first years. They never met me. They've never met anybody else in the organization. So it can be done. I'm not the only one. The one thing I would say is that it's still about the how. And so because we're in virtual, I would say, first of all, be checking in with your teams in a non-business related sense. In other words, just how they're feeling, how they're doing, how's their family, are they getting out, going for walks, things like that. So I set up with my team a half an hour meeting once a week when we started and said, look, this isn't about business updates. I just want to have a chat with you. And then at the end, I said to them, do you want to do this weekly? Is a half an hour enough? Should we do it bi-weekly? And they said, no, we like this. Let's keep doing it weekly. So that's one thing. Two, when you do get together for non-business or even at the end of a business session, there's all kinds of free ideas about how to engage people in this way online. Could be a scavenger hunt, could be a trivia contest, all kinds of free stuff. Yes, you can do cooking classes and things like that. You could do bingo though, and you can give little prizes away, an Amazon gift card, things like that. In terms of communication, I would say, Leanna, also, other than the verbal, things don't really change. If it's written, they're going to get still emails. And if it's this way, we had all kinds of events, like most organizations, that we seamlessly transition to a virtual setting. We have a global awards ceremony. We would normally get dressed up. It would be catered. We'd be in person, hand out trophies. We did it virtually, and we had live performances. In fact, Ranjith, who's on the line, who's a colleague, played for us. And so there's lots of ways that you can transition, because I will tell you, our levels of engagement actually went up over the past year. And the last reason is because it was the leaders. So again, Nick talked about it. The importance of leaders who manage people cannot be overstated. And we typically underestimate the impact we have on people. And so for leaders, for sure, what they have to understand is they have to stay close to their people. And so those are a few ideas, at least I have, Leanna.
We have, Leanna, that was a great question. And thank you for reaching out or putting your hand up. And I want to get at least one more question. And we have Rochelle with a hand up. While you're putting yourself off mute, I just want to remind everyone that you can buy the Trust Trifecta by Jordan Berman, because somebody asked me this. Somebody just asked, hey, how do you get the book? You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Chapters, Indigo, wherever digital books are sold. So
you get, yeah, exactly. You can get the paperback, or you can get an e-copy.
Perfect. Excellent. Rochelle, what's your question?
Yeah, this just has really resonated with me, because at my former organization, I would try to teach consultants how to build trust with their clients. And it was literally a class, and I would often draw from the trusted advisor, and they have this trust equation around being credible, reliable, building intimacy. It wasn't always the easiest thing to put into practice. And I just wondered, did that book have any kind of influence in your methodology? And then if you have any tips on how to teach others to increase their trustworthiness. It's such a weird concept, but I often found a bit of a struggle with that.
That's a great question and great comment. The short answer is no. I haven't even read that book, to be honest with you, so it didn't influence mine at all. And you know how, again, I think I'm a bit of a simpleton, and so you'll see it's a very easy read because the way I explain things is so people can apply it. And so how to teach people, I think you have to go back and understand what again is their objective. So if in this case, if their objective is to build trust, then try to uncover, Rochelle, what does a typical exchange look like and how are they performing that exchange? In other words, when they're challenged, for example, on something, how do they respond? When somebody asks a question, are they well prepared and how do they respond? So much of what we do is how we do it, our tone. Are we looking at people? Are we listening to people? So part of building trust, again, is about how we do it. And so, you know, anyways, those are a couple ideas. I would really understand as best as you can. Maybe they could have you sit in as an observer or something, especially now in the virtual world, on an exchange. And then you can give them feedback and say, look, here's what I saw. You know, when the client said this or somebody said that, here's how you responded and here's how I would do that. And of course, I mean, it goes without saying, I'm not sure what you're selling, what service or whatever is, they have to be knowledgeable, right? That's a big part of credibility. They have to know their stuff, but they also have to be open to other ideas and other perspectives about what they're talking about.
We are almost out of time, but I'm going to just throw one more couple little things out there before I begin the wrap up and say a big thank you. Number one, The Speed of Trust by Stephen M.R. Covey is also a really interesting read, Rochelle. I remember reading the one you mentioned. Again, it's from the 90s, I think, or maybe even the 80s.
Yeah.
Which is a great book, Trusted Advisor. But also I'm going to point out, and she's probably listening and doing other things, but Debbie Gamble, who is here from Interact, is really a great thinker on, oh, there she is, on trust and innovation. I did have the privilege of chatting with her a couple of weeks ago, but I know that she's got lots to share on the subject. I don't want to put you on the spot, Debbie, but I just wanted to shine a light on what you do and your expertise. So if you're interested in the things that Debbie is talking about in terms of trust and innovation, she is actually going to be speaking at an event in a couple of weeks. Oh, the Global AI Summit. So, or being on a panel. So I just wanted to raise that and let everyone know. We have only 3 minutes left, and I like to say in these that we're going to be done by 1. And so I want to say thank you to Jordan Berman. Can we all give Jordan a big round of applause? You can take yourself off mute if you want. I'm happy. I just think what a tremendous conversation. Jordan, at Kindler and Company, we made a decision a while back that when we engage with clients or do some sort of activity, we give to the world. And so the way we've done that is there's the global sustainability goals that were articulated by the United Nations. And so we have identified one of the 17 global sustainability goals. And that is, bear with me here while I move slides here, this one, which is creating and ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. So what we've done is we've partnered, jumped ahead, partnered with B1G1, which is Business for Good. It's an organization that we are able to actually put that money towards that goal into a specific actual project. And so on behalf of Kindler and Company, and because of our time with you, we've donated 30 days to furnishing a lab in, oh my goodness, I'm all over the place. There we go. Furnishing a lab in India.
Thank you, Nick. That is an incredibly thoughtful and meaningful gesture, honestly. So thank you. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate your time today and so many good nuggets. Honestly, I'll be going back and reviewing this talk and just taking some different notes. It will be available again later. I will be posting it down the line. What's happening next? I'm excited to announce, usually I'm announcing my next guest. I am, actually a future guest is on here, Ian Keeling. I'll be chatting with him in about a month or so. Before that, we are launching the book, which is called Impact: Simplify, Transform, and Perform Pitches and Presentations. That's right, I wrote a book, and I'm going to be launching it virtually because we can't get together. I'm sharing the registration on the book launch. I think I've shared it properly. I don't know if I have. Otherwise, please take a look. I'd love it if you can join, and please share, as we'll be getting a number of great speakers to come in and talk about a number of different concepts. Thanks, Mary Lou has just posted the correct link on there. Okay, we are at time, right at time. Thank you, Jordan. What a privilege and a pleasure it's been to chat with you. Love your book. Really enjoy chatting with you. This could have gone on for hours, but again, I know how valuable your time is. So thank you. And thank you all for attending today. I truly appreciate your time and your questions. Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Stay safe, everybody. Thank you, Jordan. Take care.